Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing okay. This is the last day for future interests. Good news is, after today, you will move on to other topics which are far more intuitive. This is perhaps the most obscure class semester. It is the Rule Against Perpetuities. Any of your friends or family members who are lawyers, they will remember the Rule Against Perpetuities as something that drove them absolutely insane. They'll remember this. It's not nearly as bad as people might remember. Why it's so notorious, very, very difficult to state simply. The general idea is that judges at common law didn't like it when some contingent remainder in the future was lingering indefinitely. Ever. You might say in perpetuity. The reason why we have this rule that we'll be studying today was to prevent estates from going on forever. They didn't want something to be lingering on forever because that was very complicated to apply. That's stating it simply. How does it actually work in practice is a much tougher story. So my plan for today is to describe some of the earlier efforts to prevent these perpetual estates that have all been abolished. And then we'll move on to the one rule that has remained to this day. It exists in Texas, it exists all over the place, which is the rule of perpetuities. All right. Questions before we start? Any questions from last time? Anything in your mind?
Yeah, I was hoping I could review the investment.
Okay. So in the context of a shifting executory interest, you're asking?
So I was just curious, when somebody can cut short of another person, fee simple and subject to divestment, or fee simple subject to the executory?
I think someone asked the same question last week, didn't they?
I remember.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you asked that question last week, right? So the short answers are synonymous, right? The word divestment merely means you're cutting something short. Executory interest is a more precise way of saying it. So there's really no difference between saying a fee simple subject to divestment, full subject to an executory interest. I think what I told Jacqueline last time is the phrase executory interest is more precise. More. So between the two, I'd prefer the latter. They're synonyms. They mean the same thing.
Okay, so it's not like divestment.
They probably, if you do like a Venn diagram, they probably overlap in 95% of the cases. So there might be some weird case of investment in executory interest. I've ever given you an example like that. There may exist some examples, so I don't want to say it doesn't exist, but for your purposes, they're the same. That's your question last time, right? I think? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? No? Okay. So the way we're going to start our class today, 2 minutes of hate, so to speak, on this guy. This is Orlando, and he's largely responsible for the Rule Against Perpetuities. This arose was in the 1600s, where these wealthy, that's where the phrase comes from, they were the landlords, who tried to tangle up their property long after they're gone. They didn't trust their oldest son to manage the property in a way that they trusted. Example is a son who was insane, right? Today we understand that's not a term of art, but back then you had things like asylums, and that's lunatics, right? Your son was deemed a lunatic. Your firstborn son managed Blackacre, but you trusted your second-born son. or maybe you trusted a grandson. Law generally said it was okay to leave property to someone you know, even if they're a baby. I don't trust this person. My great-grandson does. It may not be born for many, many years. That sort of instrument would require court to sit around and wait to see if there's a great-grandson born in 40 or 50 years. Courts do not like that. So there were 4 rules developed to help control the possibility that interest would vest too far in the future. Okay. The first one concerns contingent remainders, right? So where was I last? Where did I finish off? Who was last? Okay, Ed Garrett, Natasha, I think you're up. Natasha, remind us, how do we know if a remainder is contingent? Yeah, no, it's okay. Review from last week. How do you know if a remainder is contingent?
They have control over the future interest.
No. Precisely. What questions do we ask ourselves to know if remainder is vested or if remainder is contingent? There are very specific questions we have to ask ourselves. Oh, what are our 2 questions? Alex?
Vested, it's because when the person's ascertained, it's contingent.
Well, not contingent. What's the correct phrase? You got the first one right. Natasha?
Vested and not contingent.
No. What do you think, William? You gotta remember from last week, guys. Come on, this is not that long ago. There are 2 questions you have to ask yourselves. How do you know if remainder is contingent or vested? Alejandro?
You ask yourself if someone is a certain, and if there's a condition precedent.
Okay. Ask yourselves to determine if remainder is contingent or vested. Is the remainder man ascertained, right? Is this person in existence? His name, he exists. Question you ask yourself. Precedent, not contingent, so you confuse the 2. Right? Is there something intervening which results in them getting it? Or from death? Remainders follow naturally from death. Someone dies, and then automatically the vested remainder gets it, are needed. Remainders, however, don't have that. Contingent remainders don't have that. The person is either not ascertained or there's a condition precedent. Before, but the courts at law didn't like contingent remainders because they require you to wait and see. You have to actually wait till A dies and then determine who are the heirs, who are the people that are going to get it. And judges don't like waiting around because they want things to be resolved with certainty. The first rules described is called the destructibility. The destructibility of contingent remainders. This does not mean that all contingent remainders are destroyed. What it means is that when the preceding life estate ends, it says, does this contingent now vest? Okay, so take a look in your book. Let's do example on page example number 25. It's on page 304, right up here. Let's go back up top. Alessandro, read number 25, not the actual answer, but just the conveyance, please. Okay, so Alessandro, describe for me, what are the present interests here? Interests here. Good, A is a life estate. Okay, that's right. Why does B have a contingent remainder? Oh, give me the two questions. What are the two questions we ask ourselves? Don't just say because it's returned. Give me those two questions. But it's a condition precedent. Therefore, it's contingent remainder. Okay, right. So what happens, Alessandro, if A dies and B is not yet 21? So say A dies and B is only 18 years old in this case. I'm sorry, you gotta speak louder. You're right, O is reversion, right, under this rule. But what happens to the contingent remainder? Right, exactly right. Here is under this rule of the destruction of contingent remainders, if at the point of A's death, B is not yet 21, remainder is destroyed. O is reversion. Simple at this point. Try a different one. Hisham, want to take number 26, please?
Sure.
Page 305.
Is white anchor to A for life, then to B and for heirs.
Okay, so Hisham, what are the present and future interests here?
Life estate,
Very good. And what about B?
and B has a remainder because there's
Yes. Okay, very good. It's here under this rule. Under the rule of destruction of contingent remainders.
version.
Okay, why? Not reading the answer, but why is this the case in your own words? What happens if A dies? Already dead. B dies first, then A dies. Yeah. So the important point here is even though there's a contingent remainder of the conveyance, under this rule, which again was abolished, but under this rule, you destroy the contingent remainders of life estate. That makes sense, everybody? That one's not too hard. This rule's been destroyed, doesn't exist, but point, it made sense. Such rule, which again has been destroyed, but I want you to learn about it anyway. The rule in Shelley's case. Rather than simply stating it, let me show you an example of what it looks like. Number 27. Okay. This case works like this. Instrument that creates a life estate in A, but creates a remainder in A's heirs. The remainder base becomes a fee simple. I know that doesn't make sense. Let's walk through the example. Oh, call on. Oh, you have your little name tag. Yeah, Amanda. Write that bigger after this. I can't quite make that one out. So O conveys Blackacre to A for life, then to A's heirs. I want to write a conveyance like this. Like what? Why would anyone do this? O and A, from O to A and his heirs. Why couldn't they just say that? Why do they have to do this weird thing?
So then these guys don't have the life.
Well, let me ask this question. They had written from O to A and his heirs. Whatever he wants, right? In this situation, what can A do with Blackacre? During A's life, what can A do with Blackacre? Does anyone want to buy a life estate? Again, during A's life, what can be done with Blackacre? Can you sell it? Big point. In this situation, O doesn't trust A. Giving A a fee simple. He gives him a life estate. Heirs take later. This is like the crazy son situation. A is the crazy son. Trust A to manage the property during his life. He says, look, I don't trust this guy. He's going to go sell it for like booze or whatever, right? So instead, they put the remainder in the heirs of A. Okay? So everyone get what's going on here, right? Shelley's case says, no, 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 no. We're going to simply strike out the contingent remainder, vested remainder in fee simple. Strike that out and make it a vested remainder in fee simple. Then what happens, right? It basically becomes to A and his heirs. It converts this to a fee simple altogether. When you put it immediately followed by a vested remainder in A's heirs, A gets to decide who his heirs are then, right? This isn't the case where we wait and see who the heirs are at A's death. A gets to decide now who his heirs are. That means A has fee simple, and A can sell to whomever he wants. In Shelley's case, turns this conveyance into a fee simple absolute for A. A can do whatever he wants with it. Right? Again, the idea is the courts are striking out contingent remainders vested. And once they are vested, for fee simple for A. Always the case. Again, the rule's been abolished, but you need to know how it operates. Yeah, Alex.
So it has to be a life estate, a vested remainder,
Contingent remainder.
a contingent
Yes, sir.
remainder. That same, the heirs of the same person.
Yeah. I mean, it's listed right up here, but you have a life estate in A. Remainder described as A's heirs. The important point there is heirs are not determined until A dies, so A can't even decide the future of his land. But once that becomes a vested remainder, he can decide who those are now. Sort of neighbor, not my son, and he can decide the dispensation altogether and get rid of it. Once he has a fee simple, he can sell it. In this construct with number 27, can't sell anything. Not quite there.
Not quite there.
Okay, let's try it again. The important point is, evidence is drafted. A can only maintain it during his life. He can't sell it. No one wants to buy life estate. What it says is we're going to turn this contingent remainder into a vested remainder. We're basically going to strike out the fact it's a life estate and make it to A and his heirs, period. And then once you make it to A and his heirs, that's a fee simple and do whatever he wants with it, right? I mean, that's basically the way I think about it. You're turning followed by a contingent remainder into a fee simple. That's the effect of the rule in Shelley's case.
Defeat the whole purpose of.
Exactly. This was a rule designed to defeat the purpose of the drafters. The court said, I'm not going to let you do that. We're going to rewrite your conveyance. This is. All of these rules, we're discussing these first three rules, a pencil and like cross stuff out and made it into something else. What's going on here? Yeah, Patrick.
So they're just trying to keep property disordered.
They want to keep property tied up with these contingent remainders. They want it to be a fee simple, so now A can do whatever he wants with it. They don't want to have to worry about these things lingering on for years and years and years. Alex?
So how would this look in a hypothetical with the Hartford School example that we've been dealing with?
Involve a life estate.
To Hartford School for
The teacher.
exactly. So life of the professor. Then to how would that look? How would that operate? Real world?
Actually, I think I have an example like that in about 20 minutes, so we'll come back to this. It's in my notes. We'll get there in about 20 minutes. But that's more of a perpetuities issue because it's going to probably go past 21 years because schools last a fairly long time. So I'm not dodging your question out, but I promise I'll get to it a little bit later. Any other questions in the rule in Shelley's case? Okay, the third such doctrine, this is going to be example number 28. I think it's on the next page. The third doctrine is called the Doctrine of Worthier Title. And once again, let me give it to you with an example first before I define it. Hey, Dan, could you please read number 28, please? Just the conveyance.
Open Main Blackacre to A for life and to own air.
Right? So you've actually seen this before. You've actually seen this before. Dan, what if I just said to A for life, period? 100 times. What do we got there?
Life of the state.
What's Yeah, right? From O to A for life, period. State O is your version. We've done that example 100 times. Dan, would you add this thing at the end, then to O's heirs? What's the significance of putting that at the end of the clause? Reversion.
That O really wants for the property to stay in his family.
Reversion. Couldn't he dispose of it however he wanted? What's going on here?
Well, this seems like a cool thing to the because first of all, they're not ascertained.
Dan, when do you calculate O's heirs? O's death? Really? Whose death we're talking here?
Oh, at the time of A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see the difference here, right? Reversion. He could sell that, do whatever he wants with it, right? Hold up. The reversion is held up until when? A. Exactly. Till A dies. He dies, that remainder is still contingent. Do anything with it. O can't sell it because you don't know who all the heirs are. But if O just had a straight up reversion, he could inherit it, sell it, do whatever he wants. So again, this is like tying up a future interest. Because imagine like this, right? He's fairly late in life. His son is A. His son's a lunatic, doesn't trust his son, and says, look, this is around for my grandkids. Trust my son, because my son will get my reversion to sell it away. So I'm going to give my son a life estate that at some point in the future have grandkids running around, and then they get this contingent remainder. The landlord would do this. So what the Doctrine of Worthier Title says is where there's a conveyance to a person, right? How that person's heirs get it, interest. So what does the court do here? They just strike this entire clause out. Oops. They strike that entire clause out. O to A for life, period. Oh, there's simply reversion. O can convey its reversion. Again, the court literally takes a red pencil at this phrase, then to O's heirs. Just crosses out. Straight up reversion. In principle, they are trying to kill contingent remainders that linger on forever. Okay? Everyone understand that? Everyone understand that? Oh, yes, Hannah.
Can you repeat that rule again?
Yeah, sure. And I want to repeat it with this on the board because the example actually makes it make sense. But the rule, the Doctrine of Worthier Title says, that is O, puts a limitation on life estate for the grantor's own heirs. Created, it's a simple reversion. That is, here we have O giving a life estate. It's O's heirs. The court says, no, you can't do this. We're going to cut that out and just give O the reversion. It's a lot easier looking example than try to define it. Book where it says, try to define the rule against perpetuities in one sentence. Good luck with that. I mean, you can do it, but there's so many caveats and wrinkles that you're going to walk through this. You're not going to black letter statement that works in every case. If you want a black letter statement, go from the book. But it's not much better than what I just gave you, which is why probably you're nodding your head. Garrett, is your hand up?
Oh, no, I'm just getting back.
That's okay. You can scratch. Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I just read something about it earlier this morning. And apparently
Yeah, John Chipman Gray was a very famous professor at Harvard Law School about property, and he wrote a book like this big on the Rule Against Perpetuities, which allowed him to summarize into a single sentence. And even then, it's not that good. I encourage you, don't try to ask me, Professor, what's the one sentence definition? I'm not going to give it to you, right? I'll tell you what Chipman Gray said, but I don't pretend that it's perfect. All right. Any other questions on the first three? The destruction of the contingent remainders, the rule in Shelley's case, or the doctrine of worthier title? Any questions on those three? Yeah, Daniel.
Like a general question.
Sure.
Why did the judges not like possess land? Was it because like it evaded taxes?
So there's a couple reasons why. One of which was indeed taxes. We studied King Henry VIII, and at the time, taxes were assessed at season, right, where the little clump of dirt was transferred. All of these contingent remainders were meant at avoiding season. But the other reason is just simply one of complication. If we have to wait until A dies to determine O's heirs, that can be 50, 60, 70 years. O can have heirs spread all throughout the world. Chop up property. Rather, we have O has reversion. That's a lot easier. You can find one person now has that reversion. Makes the states when people die a lot easier. Tax is a good reason. Simplicity is another good reason. Also, judges have a general presumption of what's called alienability. They like the ability to transfer land, and they don't like when land is locked up. Because in this situation, A's basically chained to the land. He can't do anything. He has a life estate. He can't sell it because no one will buy it from him because it's only life estate. So they don't want people to be chained in this fashion. What else? Shay?
This is kind of random. Whenever like A does own the life estate, he's the one still paying taxes and stuff like that, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Whatever. I mean, property taxes exist. The life estate is. Daniel?
So the remainder here is contingent.
Well, this is a contingent remainder because the heir is not ascertained until A's death.
Even it's after life estate.
Exactly, they're not ascertained. There's no condition precedent, but they're not ascertained. The first three. Rules no longer exist. It's actually very good. So the one section you need to know is Texas Property Code section 5.042. That's a great word, right? The abolition of common law rules, and it states. The common law rules, known as the rule in Shelley's case, the rule forbidding a remainder to the grantor's heirs, title, do not apply in this state. They've been abolished. Quite that easy, because if you ever deal with an old instrument that's been around for a long time, it's subject to this rule. So new stuff, you're good, right? But in at some point in your legal career, you come across this, some old, an oil lease from the 1800s. Okay, you got to deal with this stuff. But going forward, don't have this anymore. All right. Any questions in the first three ones have all been destroyed? No pun intended. Abolished, gone. I don't say that often, but these are gone. Unfortunately, the fourth one, my friends, still exists in Texas, the majority of the states. So, I mean, Dan asked, how do you state perpetuities in a single sentence? So I will give you how the Texas legislature decided to define it in a single sentence, and you will see why trying to define it in a single sentence doesn't get you far. So it says, an interest is not good unless it must vest, if at all, not later than 21 years after some life and being, at the time of the creation of the interest of gestation. Right. right? Yeah. So the Texas legislature was more or less copying Professor Chipman Gray's summary. I mean, they tweaked it a little bit. They added a bit about gestation because it's Texas, but it's indeed true that a person in utero is a valid person for purposes of the Rule Against Perpetuities. You can imagine a father was deathly ill, his wife was pregnant, he wanted to leave land to the in utero child. That was entirely permissible. So let me give you the background of how this law developed. Case where someone said, I got an idea, let's make a rule now and let's write this in one sentence. No, this rule developed over the course of 200 years. Over the course of 200 years because it's so strange. The initial motivation for the Rule Against Perpetuities was to ensure that families could secure their land from incompetent children. This was actually a problem. And when I say incompetent, people were actually crazy. Often back then, people would be locked up in an asylum because they weren't, and oh yeah, he's insane. And they would just lock them up without any sort of requirement. But the courts began saying, okay, look, I get it. You don't like your son. He's crazy. Why you leave property to people too far in the future, right? We want you to leave property to people that you know, and then maybe ask who you know. The idea of a life in being plus 21 years. There's no problem with land to his son because he knows his son. Maybe he can even leave it to a grandson, right? Someone not yet born, but who will come into being within 21 years of someone he knows. The general effect of this was to allow a family to control land to people they know, and one generation thereafter, upon reaching the age of majority. The age of majority at the time was 21, not 18. So I want to walk you through what the book calls mechanics, but don't pretend for a minute this rule is mechanical. It's a misleading phrase. There are certain steps you can use to put yourselves in the right path. The first path for you to think about, very first step, this is the easiest step actually, because we've already done it. A future interest even subject to the rule. The first step of the rule is to find out if it even applies. So here's the easy part. Are not subject to the rule. Remainders are not subject to the rule. The reason why is that they're not floating around waiting to happen. They will happen no matter what. Concerned about vested remainder. So if you ever come across a vested remainder, you guys are done. No wrap problems. However, the vested remainder is subject to open. That is subject to the rule. This is the case where, you know, it's said to A's children, child who's alive, right? That class can open up. So a vested remainder subject to open is subject to the Rule Against Perpetuities. So that's why I made such a big fuss how to distinguish your remainders. It actually matters. Contingent remainders of all stripes are subject to the Rule Against Perpetuities. All of them are subject to the Rule Against Perpetuities. Executory interests. To wrap. I'll say wrap to save my breath, but it's the same thing, right? The Rule Against Perpetuities are subject to the Rule Against Perpetuities. About the class of gifts, that goes a little bit too far afield from what I want you to know. But what you need to know is that contingent remainders, or interests, and a vested remainder subject to open, those three categories to the wrap. So if you ever come across a problem, one of the first things you do is say, well, what kind of remainder do we have? Whether wrap applies or not. Okay, any questions on the first step? I don't like calling it a step, but it's basically the first thing you have to do. See how this all builds up? You have to know what kind of remainder it is, then to know if wrap applies. That's why this is the crowning jewel, so to speak, of this topic. The second step, jump to example number 29. It's on the next page, or I'm sorry, even the page after. It's on page. The next step is the weird one. And the reason why it's weird is it requires you to determine whether something could not happen. And once again, before you define the rule, read number 29, please. Just the conveyance, not the actual grant. Give me what are our future interests in this case? Very good. Okay, why is it contingent? There's a condition precedent. If A's first child reaches 21. Step 1. Wrap applies here. Rule against perpetuity applies here because there's a contingent remainder. Okay. Morgan, walk through this with me, right? Let me put this in a very weird way, but can A have a child after he dies? The person have a child after he dies. And I want to put aside for a moment in vitro and freezing of sperm and stuff. I know students love asking about that. We'll get to that, right? It actually puts a weird wrinkle, but at least in 1500s, right? Have a son after he's dead. Everyone agree with me, right?
No, I'm sorry.
No in vitro. I will get it later, I promise.
Vivos, none of that stuff. Just
No.
plain up.
It's right. You're in the 1500s. There's no artificial insemination yet. We'll get there. There's actually, I mean, this is why Texas rule a minute ago. It says gestation. But we're in the 1500s now, right? We'll get there. I promise. All right, so Morgan, in any stretch of imagination, the 1500s, for A to have a child after he dies. No, right? Okay, obviously. For A to have a child, what's the latest date that child could be born? The latest possible date that child could, I'll make it easier. The latest date that child could be conceived. Even easier for you, right? This possible date imaginable for A to conceive a child. He had his deathbed, right? I mean, you can use the imagination. He conceives a child and dies that day. He has a heart attack, right? Use your imagination, right? Right? It doesn't work with women because they have to live another 9 months, but at least with a man, the moment that conception happens, kicks a bucket. So one last question. Chance in the world will not reach 21 within 21 years of A's death. Is it even possible? But is there any chance that if he does reach 21, could it possibly happen more than 21 years after A's death? You did the right thing. You were thinking about this, right? That A conceives on his deathbed, right? I mean, but I mean, he conceives on his deathbed. Actually, a crazy case. I read this recently where there was this woman. I'm not joking you. She worked in a morgue. Necrophiliac. And she actually got pregnant from a corpse. Sperm lives longer than the body. And she carried it to term. She was actually trying to get pregnant. This is like an exam question. It's real. She was trying to get pregnant with corpses. Alex, maybe what you're thinking of, but I guess it is possible to have a son after you're dead. But this is a surreal. Anyway, if the child is conceived on the deathbed, right? If it ever reaches 21, it will have to be within 21 years of A's life. It cannot possibly happen later, right? Dies on January 1st, 2000. Reach 21 by 21 years later.
A situation where a child is conceived to death, but clearly born
9 months later.
9 months later.
That's why the Texas law, and I keep going back to this, says 21 years plus gestation. So it's basically 21 years plus 9 months. See? That was understood at common law, but the Texas law codified it precisely for the exact question Dan asked, because you're not born in 0 months. You're born. So it's basically, it's 21 years plus 9 months. That's how the rule works. You know, an early pregnancy, 8 months. Whatever the gestation period is, you're born early, you're born, whatever it is. The issue here is if the child will ever reach 21, it will have to happen within 21 years of A's death. It can't possibly happen a minute later. It's right. You said it a minute ago. What if A dies early? But we're not concerned with what actually happens. This is an imagination game, right? What happened? Will not vest in 21 years. This condition will certainly vest, if at all, in 21 years, right? That's why there's this language. The interest must vest, if at all. Whether it vests or not, we don't wait and see. In time, must the interest vest in 21 years, if at all? Yes, it must. That's 1 second. So this is the way the wrap works. And maybe I'll answer your question in a second, Alex, right? You have to do a couple things. Find what's called a validating life. It's sometimes called a measuring life. I don't like that phrase. I call it a validating life because measuring seems like you're counting 21 years, and that's not what's going on. You have to find a validating life. Case, who's our validating? On the back, you have your little name tag. Kang, who's our validating life in this number 9? Yeah, why is A our validating life? I can't really hear you. Does A have any children at this point? So who's the only person we can use to validate this interest? That's the answer. Right? It must be alive. It has to be a person, even in utero, that's fine. But it has to be a person in existence. Okay? And the reason why this validating life is important is this is the person that you count 21 years from. This is the person you count 21 years. So if we count 21 years from A's life, this is the example I gave Morgan a minute ago, the child will have to be 21 years. But the child would have to be 21 years. A second, Joanna. I'll get to Joanna now in a second. As a result, because this condition must vest, if at all, within 21 years, it's valid. The courts will honor this conveyance. Right? And we'll do this example 30 in a minute. Conveyance is not valid. The court takes its red pencil and it becomes something totally different. So I'll get you first.
I just wanted to know if there was any reason why in example 29 they used the trust language. That's a wrinkle.
Not for your purposes, not really.
The validating life is correct. And so associated with life estate, or what interest is it associated with?
Examples today where it's not just life estate, it can be different types of estates. Things.
What is it? Is it?
Validating life, and I'm going to try not to summarize this in one sentence because you really can't. But it has to be something, someone who's alive now that's actually affecting this interest. What people try to do is it have a thing like, you know, for the life of the queen. Well, which queen living, right? There are many queens. So people try getting around this by associating with a person who's always going to be alive at any given time. The courts try to get rid of that. So there has to be some connection between the validating life and the instrument itself. It can't just be like, for so long as the Pope is alive, right? Well, there's always going to be a Pope. Pope. But the courts did not like this. Well, you tell me, what happens if all the children die at the age of 21? What happens to the land? It goes back to who? No. What happens if no children reach the age of 21 when A dies? Here. Oh. Yeah, exactly. Very good. O has a future interest. He has, what's it called? Reversion. So O's reversion is lingering here. So what actually happens is, but we're not concerned with what happens if there are no children. It operates at the time the instrument's drafted. Drafted. Because you can draft this, right? It can be sitting in a vault somewhere for 40 years, but we assess it at the time it was drafted. If it was void, and it can never take effect. 30 in a minute where we have a void one. Time it's drafted. So I had somewhere there. Oh, this one's valid, but we'll do example 30 in a minute where they do strike it out. I will answer a question then, okay? What a good question. What a perfect question. You read my mind. You want to do it? Yeah, go for it. Okay. You read my mind. Okay, so read 30. We'll walk through it, okay? Yeah, Matt's like, yes, he skipped me. No, I'll back to you. Yeah. So read number 30, please. Good. Okay, so here we have the exact question you asked me 30 seconds ago, right? You have a life estate in A. It says to A's first child to reach 25. A has no child age 25 or older. Okay? Aislinn, is there any way, possible way, that A can have a child 21? Is it possible? I'm asking another question, not this one. Is it possible to have a child that reaches 21? Within 21 years of A's death? Okay. Is it possible for A to have a child that reaches 25 within 21 years of his death? Yes. I ask the question again, it's a tricky question. Is it possible for A to have a child that reaches 25 within 21 years of his death? No. The question is very precise. Right? He dies. Can he possibly have a 25-year-old within 21 years of his day of death? How? He has no kids at the time. He conceives on his deathbed, right? He conceives on his deathbed. Possibly reach 25. No, why not? It's not. Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's not possible. Exactly right. It's impossible, right, for A to have a child on his deathbed, conceive on his deathbed, and for that child to then reach 25 within 21 years. It's not even. It's impossible. Matter, right? That he could have had a child, a year after this instrument was drafted. At the time it was drafted, there was no child in existence. So we presume scenario that the guy literally is conceiving on his deathbed, right? What a way to go, right? He's conceiving on his deathbed. It cannot possibly vest within 21 years if the condition is 25. So this will never vest in time. In other words, the child reaching 25 is too remote in the future. And because it's too far in the future and can never vest, so what we actually do is take our red pencil. All right, Matt, I'll go back to you now, right? We strike out this last clause. Strike it out. And what's the future interest become? Oh, exactly right. It says because this interest is too far remote, it'll vest too far in the future. We'll take our red pencil, strike it out, and at the time it's drafted now, conversion. Which is, again, the same thing that would have happened. Same thing that would have happened if A died without any children. It would have gone back to O. We're going to strike out this remainder now and not worry about waiting it. Well, there is a validating life. A is a validating life. I'll get to you guys in a second. A is the only possible validating life here. The important point is A age over 25 at that point. Then the condition will be vested. Here we had a child that reached 25. Because even let's say you had a child that was 24. The child dies the next day and never reaches 25th birthday. You have to see who is your validating life. 24 years old is not a validating life because he can die. And it's always possible for A to have more kids. Several hands. Caitlin? Good. I love when that happens. Yeah.
So, okay, so A has, the life estate, and then if the first child gets to be 25, he gets the remainder. So you have to assume that the worst, that A will,
assume the worst.
That A will die like the day
on his death. He will conceive on his deathbed, yeah.
Okay.
You have to basically assume that he will conceive on his deathbed. Because even if he had a child the year before he died, that child could simply die. It's the last possible moment where the father can conceive. Is it possible for that offspring to reach 25 within 21 years? The answer is no. Is void. Jacqueline? Not necessarily. Even if he has a child that's 24, right? 25, and the child can die the day after the instrument's drafted. It's irrelevant. For a 24-year-old, it makes no difference. Alex, patiently waiting.
I'm following up on.
Good, good.
The conveyance word. He has 4 children aged. At the time of conveyance, they can reach.
They could, but they don't have to. They can all die. Again, this is violent. But we presume that all these children can die, therefore they cannot be the validating life. It has to be the person who yields children, right? What's the condition? Children reaching 25. Who creates children? A. That's your validating life, not the little kids, right? The validating life has to be associated with the condition itself. Make more brothers and sisters by themselves. They can't do that. Only A can make more kids. Part of property, but even if A is 80 years old, you presume people are fertile. It's the idea of the fertile octogenarian that we burn in your mind forever. But you guys 80 years old, like Hugh Hefner, right? He can still pop out kids.
I understand it doesn't matter how outlandish the hypothetical is.
Exactly.
You can already have 100 children.
Doesn't matter. They all die.
One day.
Yeah.
Just because they don't die.
They all die. Yep. You have to be the biggest pessimist in the world, right? For this class, the glass is half empty every single moment. Everyone can die at any juncture. It's gross, but if you look at my old exams, and violently right before the 21st birthday, it's a remarkable thing. How many people die the day before they go drinking the night before the birthday, car accident, right? Die before they reach 21, and you need to consider all these factors. Even if, right? Well, the example is, example 29 didn't consider existing at the time. It's if A gives birth on his deathbed, reach 21, right? The measuring life here is A. It happened that any new child could reach 21 within 21 years. But here, it would not necessarily happen. It could not happen. That's dead sex, right? His child reaches 25 within 21 years. All right, why is 29 and 30 different? The key point is with the measuring life, you have to presume at the latest possible juncture, could a new child be born? And could that child possibly reach 21 years? Yes.
So not saying a new child.
Yeah,
If it was
exactly.
24,
Yeah,
it would be
The
25,
existing
but
children
then-
may not be validating lives. The validating life here is the father, and you count 21 years from that. Daniel?
So you presume that all the children of A are not.
Irrelevant, yeah. Basically, the children of A at this point are utterly irrelevant because they can all die. The measuring life is A himself. 21 years from. Joanna.
So there's no validating life. You're saying like because even on his deathbed, his child could not reach 25. Isn't A still the clock though?
A is the clock. You measure it from A.
Okay.
Because, and I think Alex's question a minute ago, where do A's children come from? You need to start counting from A.
So why does it say there's no validating?
I'm not sure, actually. Yeah, I'm not even sure. A is the clock. Yeah, Jacqueline. The editors read that one. But in the 8th edition, maybe. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'll see you later. But yeah, Jacqueline. Because the 5-year-old in this case, right, died the very next day. Boom. Oh, let's start this question again. Same, right? Your questions are all good. You need to determine the validating life, and the validating life is A. The possibilities of other people are irrelevant because they may not live long enough. Another example in a minute, they may actually answer your question, but you need to keep your time ticking from the validating life, which is A. Rabbit holes, all those people can die.
So A has a child that is 25 while he's alive, but validating life isn't even a question. It just goes to
If in this question, let me rephrase your question. 25-year-old, is it a contingent remainder? Is it?
that's because he's ascertained.
Yeah, it would actually be a little bit tricky, but child was 25, so there's no more condition. The rule would even apply to that condition. Isaac?
Since it doesn't, since it looks at it from the point of drafting, even if a child does in fact survive 25,
I think I lost you in the middle.
it doesn't matter what actually happens, it only matters the
Yes.
hypothetical, no matter how outlandish.
Yes.
Even
Yes.
if A does have a child who does reach 25.
No.
they can go back.
Boyd. They took their red pencil, they struck this out. So A's 25-year-old gets zip. And in fact, the way this arises is, right, let's say a lawyer drafts this as, and, you know, A dies and his son's 26, like, yes, look, I get this. And then O's like, yeah, no, it's my reversion. Because this is void under wrap. Situation where decades after an instrument's drafted, the court voids it. Wildlife is expecting Blackacre, like, oh, I want Blackacre, I want Blackacre. And then his father dies, he gets 0. Done in a proper manner. Garrett. I can't pretend what I will not, but these get very complicated. So some of there, Dan.
I'm kind of trouble with the understanding of validating.
I know you are. We'll do example 31 in a minute. Well, I'm going to pause any more questions because 31 is actually a better I know it's tricky, but I will come back to you, I promise. And Jacqueline also, I promise. Yeah, Joseph.
I was just curious. Yes, I may not be- But is this only applicable to completing a condition with 21 years?
Oh man, I don't know what you just said.
Yeah, okay, so.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna try my best.
We're focusing on children reaching 21 years of age or 25 years of age.
Right.
But is it possible that this could apply to the grantor himself passing law school within 21 years?
Oh, I have a question like that later. I have a question very similar to that in the notes.
My issue is that we're focusing these guys on death.
Yeah, I got a couple questions like that in the roster. We'll get to it a little bit later. It's actually it's the same question basically. And Joseph, example 31.
So do trusts work differently?
For our purposes, don't worry about it. I think Alex asked this question a minute ago. Don't worry about the difference. The general difference is with trusts and devises, someone's already dead. Take effect after death. That's the only difference, but it doesn't really matter for our purposes. All right, Jude, I think you're up next. Read the grant number 31, please. This one's pretty intense. Okay. What's the situation there? Oh no, but read the next sentence. Like what are the facts? What are the facts on the ground? So Jude, so the first step is this remainder vested or contingent? Yeah, right. Someone has to reach 21 first, right? Jude, who's our validating life here? But I think it'll help illustrate this principle. Well, which child? Ah, exactly. Hear what he just said? T's children is the validating life. Why is it the one who lives longer, the survivor, Jude? In order for T to have grandchildren, who are the only people who can create T's grandchildren? You see? The only way for T to have more grandchildren is if T's kids continue giving birth. The fact that there are 3 grandchildren alive now is entirely irrelevant, right? Because they can all die. Is the person who can make more grandchildren. And the validating life has to be whoever lives longer. Which son or daughter lives longer, right? Which of T's children lives longer? That's your validating life. Finish it up. Will a grandchild reach the age of 21 within 21 years of the death child? Well, must it? Yeah. Each child will reach 21 years. Happen, if at all, within 21 years of the death of a child. Again, the surviving child is on his deathbed and conceives, right? That child must reach 21 or will not reach 21 at all. But the condition must complete itself within 21 years. In other words, you will know the right answer. After the death of the surviving child, you'll know. Or he's not 21. There's no middle ground. This gift is valid under the rule against perpetuities. Irrelevant who these grandchildren are. Die. You need to remember who's validating life. The person who can give more grandchildren. In this case, is a surviving child of A and B. Or asking about the validating life. Does that make sense? Okay. Because what happens, right? What happens if instead of it saying 21, it says 25, right? These reach 21 in time. That at the very last minute of a child never reach within 21 years of his death. Because of that possibility, the entire thing's void. The existing grandchildren are screwed. If this said 25, because it could potentially vest beyond 21 years. Look again at the worst case scenario, right? Could this condition be void? Because it has to happen within 21 years. But if this had 25 instead of 21, there's a chance that it will not vest. Therefore, the entire thing's struck out. That's a validating life. And you measure the last grandchildren born from child. That's your validating life. That's the key.
So if is that validated as the same grandchildren?
Only way, and the fact I mentioned this briefly, but divides mean T's dead. He can't have any more kids. So if he has one child, that's your validating life. Okay, is there 2 kids? So it's whichever one lives longer. Plural.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just safely assume that.
You know, I think that's a. I haven't noticed that before, but I think you're right. It's just a grandchild. I think grandchildren complicates it even more. You're actually right. I'm going to make a note to the editors about that, but I think it should be. No, it's a good point. I mean, it makes the question unnecessarily complicated. If it said grandchild, same question without the complication of twins, maybe, I don't know, right? But I'm going to make a note.
In the footnote, it asks whether it would make any difference.
I'm not going to bother you with that stuff. Okay, Lynn, yes, ma'am.
So the grandfather has 2 children, one of them dies, and then at the end of the surviving child, he has no more children on other dies. So are those children he already has? Are they able to get the trust or no? Like,
Repeat it one more time. I think I lost you in the middle.
the other grandpa dies.
Okay, good.
So that kid, the surviving kid,
Right.
has 2 children. And he never has any other children, and he dies. The
Right.
son dies. And the 2 of them, will they be up for the trust, or will they?
Yes,
Okay.
they will. Because his interest is valid, it's fine. The surviving kid has a child, and that child reaches 21 within 21 years of the parent's death, if they have to. This is a valid interest. Valid percent, the kids take it once they turn 21. And in fact, if there are like 5 or 6 grandkids running around, they have to split it. Yes.
So all of the grandkids, like parents,
The same stock, yeah. These are all T's grandkids.
like T's children,
Grandchild is if your child is a child.
it goes from the voting line to the oldest living child of T.
Right?
So can T's other children?
If the interest is valid, they all take. If the interest is valid, they all take.
So if the interest is valid,
I think, and I think this is actually Garrett's question. I think the reason why they drafted this way is valid as soon as one of them reaches 21. It gets complicated as if they each reach 21 year after year after year. They'd have to then chop it up in several pieces. Effectively, what have to happen is, as each new child turns 21, the people got before it have to give up some of their share. It's a weird thing, right? So I don't let's make it money, right? Instead of property, let's say it's $1 million, and then they can chop it up different ways. It makes it a little bit easier.
all of the known grandkids have reached 21 and they all take their share. Let's say 21 years after they all think they're free.
Right.
A lost tenant shows up from one of the two.
Oh, like a child that was not known, whatever, right?
Yeah, like the hospital.
What you call it? Hush hush baby. I mean, look. So there wasn't Maury Povich back then, right? So you didn't have paternity testing, but you do have that stuff today. You show up and you see that you're indeed a grandson of T, then they got to chop up their property and give you an interest.
So what if you've already done something with the property? How would
You pay your damages, right? Assuming that they've already conveyed it. Actually, you want to be precise? There were 2 grandchildren who reached 21, and they jointly sold it. Kid running around. That conveyance may not have been valid. Man who didn't get it. So it's actually possible that a court could set aside the sale. A number of years, the court can actually set it aside. We'll do something like that in a couple weeks, but for buying property, we think it's okay, and a person didn't really own it, but you can actually lose it.
So under example 31, on a final, in for 10 answer.
There's a contingent remainder, and then the rule against perpetuity applies to it. I think you say that the validating life is the survivor of T's grandkids. And because any grandkid must reach 21 within 21 years of that surviving child's life, the gift is valid. And that's it. I mean, if you want to just copy the answers right there at the, that's phrased pretty well also, but that was off the top of my head. Jacqueline? And that could invalidate the gift, right? Because the subsequent child could invalidate the gift, they all lose. Kyle?
So you're saying all the grandchildren alive?
No, I did not say that. Like that. Yeah, I did not say that. And I'm not going to try it. I'm not going to try to rephrase it because it's off. But you think what we said before, or Lamb.
So would it be accurate to say that if there is a chance for the contingent remainder to still be a contingent remainder after 21 years of the validating life's death, then it's not valid?
Resist all these efforts that you summarize this in one sentence because it's not summarizable in one sentence. Work through each circumstance at a time, and I'm not trying to dodge your questions, but if you try to summarize this in a single sentence, you're going to confuse yourself. If you're going to try and say a single rule for all cases, you're going to confuse yourself. Example 32. See, we've spent 90 minutes on 4 examples, but I'm telling you, this topic is crazy. Hey, Isaac, number 32. Number 32. Let's walk. This one's even trickier. And just the conveyance, please.
At time of T's death, A is an 80-year-old woman with 2 children.
Okay. So first off, what are the present and future interests here?
The present interest is that A has a life estate, A's children be get a life estate. Then
So here's what makes this case so complicated, right? You may think that, okay, A is an 80-year-old woman with 2 living children, B and C. Grant says entrust to A for life, then to A's children for them. The death of the last surviving child to A's grandchildren. So Isaac, how does A get more grandchildren? How can that happen? Oh, so the first thing you may want to say is, wait a minute, B and C, right? Right? Are the ways that A gets more grandchildren. But A can have more kids. A can have more kids. So walk through this chain with me, right? I'm gonna walk through it, okay? You're on pause for me. I'll come back to you if I want to, okay? Conveyance is drafted. After this conveyance is drafted, child X. Okay? And then say X, 30 years later, has another child, Y. Y is the grandchild of A. Y is the grandchild of A. Be born after 21 years following the death of A, B, or C. Okay? A, B, or C can be long dead, but Y is then born. A is void. Well, maybe I'll clarify, right? It's an insane idea, but you can't measure this solely based on B and C, right? Lives. But it's still possible for A to have another kid, X, or X has Y. So more than 21 years after validating lives of B and C, Y can be born. And a grandchild can be born 21 years after the death of A, B, or C. So anyone in existence at the time of this question, A, B, or C, they're all dead. And poof, here comes another grandchild. Void under wrap.
Tolling time is not.
I'm sorry?
If the tolling time is not.
What do you mean tolling time?
21 years.
Yeah. Well, the 21 years lapses, right? But we're more than 21 years out. So I can be born more than 21 years after our validating lives, then the entire interest is void.
So we're going to go worst case scenario.
Dude, you are the pessimist. Your glass is half empty, right?
So it's not like, hey, you can knock it off tomorrow.
Well, I wouldn't put it quite that way, but yes, you have to be a pessimist. X can give birth many years later. And then Y comes around. Nor Y was in existence at the time of this document. So they cannot be validating lives. Only people in existence at the time this document was drafted can be validating lives. X cannot be a validating life. Yes, I love when that happens. Good. A, B, or C, and which of those are the validating life? I'd probably say B and C. I think that's probably the better answer. But Y can be born more than 21 years after the death of B and C. Therefore, the interest is void. It doesn't matter how unlikely it is that an 80-year-old will conceive a child. It's actually irrelevant for our purposes. It doesn't matter. Isaac. That's fine, right? That's fine. If you said to B and C's children, that's fine because B and C must have children within their own lifespans. I'm saying it within the grandchildren of A. They went back to the original grantor. Yeah, these are trying to control too far in the future for too remote. I think Garrett first and Joanna.
Just for clarity's sake.
For clarity's sake, right?
We're trying one grandchildren.
Yeah. So Garrett, I'll ask you because you're there. What happens when B and C die? Reversion to T. Exactly. Take your red pencil. You strike it right out. Again, the entire purpose of this is at the time it's drafted. Could this be voided within 21 years? No. Future interest. Joanna. I'd say it's B and C because they determine the age of the grandchildren because they're the only ones in existence at this time. He can pop out more children and then some more grandchildren. I think B and C the validating life here. And it has to go beyond their 21 years of their death. All right. More about the bar exam. Someone asked me about this. I'm going to try and find it. Yeah. Oh, it's on page 312. Where is it? 3 on page 312. Who wants to do it? You're next, I think, Laura. Yeah. 13. I'm sorry. Property teacher. Okay, so read that one, please. Do you think that'd be effective? $1,000, 100, 80 odd ways. Not very much. Anyway, so okay, a professor says $1,000. That's the new bar prep strategy. Bribe you, right? She hold $1,000 for all members of my present class who are admitted to the bar. Is this gift good? Just like that. A minute, but is this gift good? Good. I mean, all of you will pass the bar, perhaps on the first shot, but God willing, you all pass the bar. But it's not ascertained, right? It's not certain. Is the gift valid under wrap? Here. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Validating lives. All of you, right? You are all the validating lives. Laura, is there any chance that any of you will pass the bar after your own death? I don't even think about that, but generally speaking, right? You have to pass the bar during your own lives plus 21 years, so this gift is valid. Now, Laura, the second question says, the proper professor said, for the first child of A, does that gift valid? No, you can answer it. You can answer. You want to take it, Dan? Okay. And will A's child pass the bar within 21 years of A's death? Almost certainly not. Why not? What age usually sit for, what's the youngest you can sit for the bar? Right. So this condition will almost certainly not vest unless you're like Doogie Howser or something, right? Doogie Howser, the odds are, you know what Doogie Howser is? The young doctor? Okay, good. You actually watch TV, right? So, prodigy and take the bar when you're like 17, whatever, right? There's no guarantee that it vests at all. Maybe you fail it. Condition will not be certain to vest within 21 years of the life of A. The gift is void. Is void. This is why the first part's valid, the second part is void. Jacqueline. So it says here, the second part. $1,000 for the first child of A. A is a student in the class who's admitted to the bar. Is it certain that A's child will pass the bar within 21 years of A's life? Maybe they go to law school, but they never get sat for the bar, right? This condition of whether the student passes the bar is not certain to occur or not within 21 years. It may happen very far in the future. Therefore, the gift is void, right? There's no certainty that it vests within the 21-year period after A's death. It's void. Crazy, right? I'll take one more question. I'll summarize it up. Shoot. Because you're saying to everyone in the class, right, you'll get $1,000. It's certain that all of you will pass the bar during lifetimes or not. It's impossible for you to pass the bar after death. Exam and die and get results, but God forbid. But you're gonna sit for the bar. In fact, it's try to be sitting for the bar rather than passing would be a better example, but we can quibble. Questions? Oh, Alex, after class, I gotta wrap this up, okay? This is, I don't test you on this, right? If you read the syllabus, you'll know this already, right? There's a reason why I don't test you on this, because it takes the most simple, straightforward future, people call them laptops, right? It takes the most simple, straightforward future interest questions and makes them absolutely insane. Once you inject the wrinkle of the rule against perpetuities, it makes questions impossible to grade, because everyone, my God, comes up with these bizarre hypotheticals of all these things that can happen. So I'll give you a very simple answer, Alex, 10 out of 10. If the answer you write for my exam involves rule against perpetuities, you're wrong. If you mention RAP, not the answer. The answer is very deliberately, so that all the interest vests within 21 years of the life of being. I'm very careful about this. And if you say, oh, Blackman's trying to trick us up, he's going to, no, I'm not trying to trick you up. I promise you. Okay, and I am not alone. The reading discusses at the end Texas's reform, so to speak, if you went to the readings. And Texas and another states, hey guys, don't back up yet. I still have a few minutes left. I know I said it's not an exam, but don't put your books away yet. It's a bad sign. Texas has adopted a rule that says, well, under RAP, if we can find a way to read it that it's not void, let's do that. To effectuate the intent of the testator, what's called cypre, C-Y-P-R-E-S. It's called cypre. Section 5.043A of the Property Code says, a court shall reform an interest in real property that violates the rule to affect the ascertainable intent of the creator. Liberally construe and apply the provision to validate an interest to the fullest extent consistent with the creator's intent. If you could find a way to take your red pencil and rewrite the thing under RAP, Texas courts are instructed to do so. Think about it, this is a very violent remedy, right? You could draft this and you could be dead for 50 years and then suddenly your great-grandson's like, oh yes, I get all this property now. And then someone comes along and validates the interest. Remedy. In other states, they've adopted what's called the US RAP, the Uniform Statutory Rule Against Perpetuities. And in some states, they have what's called the wait and see approach, where they literally say 90 years, and then we come back and see if it's valid now at its outset. But the RAP still does exist in a number of states, and you need to know it, and you'll need to know it for the Texas bar exam. Far simpler than the insane hypotheticals you're asking me about, because if they put these insane hypotheticals, everyone will get different answers. And that's not a very good bar question. Bar questions are trying to be as straightforward as possible. 30 seconds left. Anyone with a quick question? Otherwise, come up afterwards. Yeah.
So if I just want to go back to the first part.
Come up afterwards. That's not a quick question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't keep people late. Anyone else? All right. Have a good day. Please come back afterwards. We have to answer your questions.
So just real quick, what's the significance of 21 years?
That was the age of majority.